So please will you join me in welcoming Professor Zeki and Professor Iriki.
Welcome to the theatre, and I am dressed like this, but I practice, although I practice now, I'm a neuroscientist, professional neuroscientist, and Zeki is an eminent neuroaesthetics neuroscientist. Maybe just I introduce briefly how I'm interested in Noh and practice it, and then you can follow by your interest. Well, my grandfather had been practicing the Noh chanting. He already passed away, but it was like a common people's higher rebel arts. So that's why Japan didn't have so many illiterates for the past hundreds of years. And that's motivated me first. And then since I was acquainted with one of the professional Noh actors, like will come in the following performances, for more than 30 years. And that's why I was interested. We have been talking over the drink and so on, how to combine the Noh, which is a Noh performance, and brain science, which is called Noh Kanaku. It sounds similar in Japanese, to combine the two Nohs and to do the neurosciences work. That was my interest. And how about you, perhaps by a neuroaesthetic point of view?
Well, I'm really interested in the mechanisms of the brain, how the brain functions, how we see, and how what we see arouses an effective emotional state so that we can experience beauty in what we see. And I'm interested in Noh theatre not only in itself, but as representative of theatre in general. For example, the face, and especially the mask, is a very, very prominent feature of Noh theatre. And it is quite interesting that this corresponds to a very extensive representation of the face and facial expressions in the brain. Now, the interesting thing about Noh is that the facial expressions expressed through the mask are very disciplined, and so you can really study them very carefully, as opposed to studying, for example, either sort of a mace or do something or the other like that. It's very undisciplined. Whereas in the case of Noh, there are specific movements that are related to specific expressions. That is one interest I have. Should I go on, or do you want to? Oh, why not? So, the other thing then is the relationship between the face and the body. It's very critical in Noh, as I understand it. And there are also many areas in the brain that are devoted to the representation of the body and to body movements. What is not really known, it is known that the two representation of the face and the representation of the body are linked, but how they are linked is not known, and Noh provides a means of studying it.
Yeah, those higher perception, the binding problem of the many different bits of aspect of information in bindings, is, I think we agree, that was taken care of by the higher association cortex. And those cortex, the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain, those are the areas most expanded during the course of the evolutionary history of primate evolution. And those are, so not a direct, transfer of the physical energy into your neuroactivity, but you have to unify and abstract the informations and put together in the brain. And there are many parts of that in the brain like that. But one aspect, one part of the brain that I'm very much interested in is called parietal cortex. It's on this part of the brain. And this is expanded most. And the facial expression by Terasio and Komurasu, that's related with shadows, we cast shadows. Mm-hmm. And those are also taken care of by the parietal cortex. And I think that was some implication that how the Noh performance and Noh play is constructed in an abstract way, in a symbolic way, is also taking care of this part of the brain. And that very much interests me.
Yes. Well, you see, it's quite interesting to reflect on how all this developed, because Noh as a art form is many hundreds of years old, and these movements and the relationship between body movement and facial expression must have been arrived at unconsciously. They were not aware of the brain. It's quite interesting, actually, to reflect that the use of the mask, which is central in Noh theatre, is not unique to Noh theatre. It's also very common it was in Greek tragedy, in Greek theatre, and in the Commedia dell'arte in Italy. But Noh is unique in that the expressions are actually fixed. I mean, the Scheidt, who is the main actor,
also the kind of the master.
Yes,
very simplified and abstract.
Yes, whereas in the Commedia dell'arte and in ancient Greek tragedy, the main actors would change the mask as they took on a different persona or a different personality. In Noh, the mask is more or less constant. And that's why it lends itself more easily to a study of the relationship between facial expression and their representation in the brain, on the one hand, and the relationship between facial expression and body movement on the other.
So in that sense, what's the founder of Noh is called Zeki. He said, you have to objectify yourself. You know, the non-human animals, the creatures, are looking from your eyes to the world. That's more subjective, first person's perspective of the whole world, which is easily handled by our ancestral brain. But for the Noh performer also, they need lots of training. And after the training, they can acquire some kind of those perspectives, which have been not described in non-human animals. And that's, I think, is the part that Japanese culture has taken thousands of years to come up with this thing. And that's after kind of the cultural evolution or natural selection within culture, either as a training outcome, acquired and described in the form of the Noh play. I think that's an invention of Zeki at that point, but 650 years ago.
As I understand it, and I don't know, you can perhaps explain it to us, as I understand it, a Noh actor, the Scheidt, the main actor, Shita, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The one who wears the mask, is the person who actually goes into a private room before a performance and communes with the mask. Is this true? And sort of sees the world through the mask and becomes a different person, different persona.
Don't ask me. I am not a professional Noh master. I just practiced from...
Well, I have read this in Noh manuals. It's an interesting thing.
There are many professional Noh actors here around for coming days, so maybe we can have a conversation.
It would be interesting to find that out. Let me just take you back to the question of binding, or of what Noh theatre is. Since Zeki, the son of the founder of Noh theatre, emphasized, which is bringing together melody and rhythm and facial expression. Not so much the story, because the story, I gather, was usually well known to people.
And very simple.
Very simple.
So what people did, what?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. So it was mainly the experience that people were having. But you see, the binding problem is a central problem in in brain studies. Yes. Nobody knows how this occurs. The fact that you've got a medium such as Noh, which is quite as simple as that, makes it more amenable to study in terms of learning about binding. Because I mean, one of the central problems of brain studies has been for generations, now for over 100 years, to understand how the specialized parts of the brain interact to give you the integration that is evident in thought and in behavior, which is exactly what happens in Noh.
And also the time perception. There's a component of time, and time is like a parameter of the physical world to explain the transition of things. But time is only the sensation that doesn't have a receptor. And time is something like to create it in your brain, like a concept, abstract concept to explain things. And there's no time cerebral cortex, no time center.
Yes.
But there's something abstract center, which very much overlaps with the part where you cast shadows in the parietal, parietal areas. And especially, this is a conversation with my acquainted friends, no actors, that scan their brain and look at their time perception. You'll see that no act is very slow. It hardly moves at some time.
Yes.
But you have emotion internally, perceives very rapid movement of emotion, movement of body, yet it's not moving at all. Probably from illusory, combination of the many setups, including stage and actors. They are creating something to compose the concept of time, to unify everything in the brain.
Why do you think they opted on such slow motion?
Well, that gives you more room to interpret the things. Well, this is my personal observation. And at the same time, can allow the performer to synchronize the breathing and heartbeat and with audience and make the whole unified. The audience is part of the Noh play. It's not just the stage, which represents the whole universe, but you have to be united.
Yes.
And I think that's different from most of the Western performing arts that I know.
Yes.
It's showing them. It's not showing them. It's creating something together as an audience. In the common synchronization, it's like a binding with the performer and the audience's brain.
Yes.
As a social brain.
There are examples in Western art of very, very slow movement. One of the ones which comes to mind now is Michelangelo Antonioni's film La Ventura, which was extremely slow. It's still extremely slow. It was very much criticized. At the time it was first produced in the 1960s as being extremely slow. But then people began to realize that you actually become part of the movie because you can do it. And this is presumably the basic principle in Noh. May I just move on to what to me is the most appealing part of Noh, which is that you become part of the performance and what Zeami called Yugen. Am I spelling that correctly? Yugen, sorry. Which is really beauty that is only half perceived, or not fully perceived, but completely felt. And that's an extremely interesting concept.
It's modest and suppressive. And
Modest.
It's difficult to translate in different languages. It looks mysterious. It's not mystery. It's obvious but mysterious. And some floating atmosphere.
Yes.
You feel it directly.
Yes.
And that's not only Noh, but it's common among many of the Japanese culture.
Yes. It's also a big feature of some philosophical writings in Western culture. For example, Arthur Schopenhauer said that something, and indeed the ultimate thing in art, must be left over for the mind to do. And that's what Noh is doing. But you see, the emphasis in Western culture has often been on unfinished in terms of painting and the unstated. The unstated is extremely important in Japanese culture and Noh theatre, is it?
If you say Western culture, probably you're talking about modern Western culture.
Well, I'm not really talking about... no, I mean, look, modern Western culture and modern Japanese culture, because Yukio Mishima took over Noh plays and readapted them. So this thing is called Noh Reimagined.
This thing?
Yeah. So I'm not being entirely illegitimate when I say that when I talk about Yukio Mishima or William Butler Yeats. They both took Noh and readapted them. And I've seen Noh plays, dramatic performances of Noh theatre done by, written by Yukio Mishima.
He actually wrote like a dozen of the modern Noh play. And at that time, as far as I know, there's many modern Noh play composed or created at a time, but most of them have just took the form of the Noh play. And what Mishima did is, it's not just a form, but he represented the spirit, the principle behind.
Yes.
And that is the Mugen and Yugen. And this is very difficult to express. It's not just a form.
Yes. But in readapting it, as I understand it, like is it Lady Aoi? I can't spell that. A-O-I, the lady from the tale.
Aoi no Re.
From the tales of
That's
the
one of the novels.
Yes, but he adapted it. He adapted it, and he did not use masks. But it has been presented in an extremely effective and highly sexualized context.
And Mishima was a bodybuilder, and he tried to integrate the body and the spirit.
Yes.
And that's what, the Noh is a total art. How to integrate this body, face, and spirit in a very abstract and simplified way.
Yes. I would wonder whether since I'm interested in the brain, I'm interested in the brain for all. I believe that fundamentally all our brains are very similar, and I wonder nobody seems to have commented on this, but the similarity between the total artwork, which we're talking about in terms of Noh theatre, and Wagner's concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk, which is the total artwork. And again, he thought, you see now Ziami again, the founder of Noh theatre, thought that there was a moment when you experienced extreme beauty and you communed with the actors, and this was very rare to achieve. And when you achieved it, you were in a sublime state. Wagner thought the same thing, and in a way he said, I hope nobody ever gives a completely perfect performance of my operas, because then the audience will go mad.
Well, he himself will go mad.
He was quite
for different reasons.
But it's an interesting thing. Have you yourself ever experienced this moment of communion, this moment of what neurobiologists call immersion? Completely immersed. If I may quote you a line from Eliot, music that is felt so deeply, that it heard so deeply that it's not heard at all, but that you become the music while the music lasts. That, I think, is what Ziami is really aiming for.
You become the music.
You become the music while the music lasts.
And music becomes you.
Yes, and you
probably vice versa, reverberation of the reflection of yourself and atmosphere, which is the music. So that's what the topic of my new Noh piece will be played tomorrow.
Oh, well, how wonderful. I didn't know that.
So that's a unification of yourself with the whole universe. You have to become a part of the universe. I think this is one typical aspect of the Japanese culture. It's not establishing your self-identity. It is important, but it's not just that, and to show off, but to be incorporated and unified. And that's the brain function that's most evolved in human beings, is taken care of.
Yes. So let me just ask you, I mean, there are very interesting topics to talk about in terms of neurobiology, certainly neurobiology of beauty. But let me just ask you, how representative is Noh theatre of Japanese culture, and how unique is it? I mean, for example, compared to Kabuki.
Well, probably that will be the subject of the next Professor Yamanaka's lecture. I'm not a scholar on the Japanese
but
culture. But maybe a little bit more than you. Right. Well, Kabuki is much modern than the Noh. Kabuki was established like us 400 years ago. And Noh has established in the 13th, 14th century. But that was the formation of the more primitive art.
Yes, but they have got certain things. I mean, movement is also extremely important in Kabuki. They don't use masks in Kabuki, but movement.
They have painting on the faces. I have one Kabuki actor who was a national treasure, and he is very good at dancing.
But painting is not the same, you see. Now, this is, I'm now constant, as you're now telling me. Painting is not the same, because painting you can paint with your art and do all the same. See, I can shout loud. See, it's all the same face. So that's a significant difference, don't you not say?
Could be, but I'm not good at making a comment here. I'm afraid of misunderstanding here. So,
right.
Probably go more for the neuroscience, link with the neuroscience. And,
Well, perhaps you could tell us a bit more, because I did not know this, and I'm sure everybody else is interested, about the timing in Noh. In terms of
time, what I refer to time is both duration and also the timing.
Yes, but its representation is in the parietal cortex, you say.
The part of it.
By the way, the parietal cortex is situated here in case it is. Which part? And is it close to any other area which is of significance to?
It's an inferior parietal cortex.
Right.
It's close to the area dealing with the language and numbers and those kind of abstract concepts. And the time is represented as part of one of those varieties of abstract concepts.
Right.
As timing is a different thing. Timing is also, it's a time, something related to time, but timing is more related to like movement. So it's more closely linked to the body and the motor functions and somatic sensory function where the movement is created.
So let us move on to another topic which I think is of huge interest in terms of neurobiology, and that is the topic of ambiguity. Presumably, No theatre is the theatre of ambiguity, is it not?
Ambiguity in some sense, and also the metaphor of multiple meaning, plural meaning.
Multiple meanings to multiple people.
Multiple people.
They can compose
create their own world of their own, but something in common and resonate with each other. But no actor and the audience have freedom to interpret as they perceive or as it's not just as it cannot be selfish, but there's some common principle behind it. But they allow a variation of the interpretation.
Yes. Well, I think it's quite interesting that the main character usually, the Shita you call him, what do you say? Shita, the main character in
Shita.
It's usually a tragic character, is it not?
I don't know.
Because I read a table of No theatre in which out of 100 main characters, only 3 were victorious. The rest were all defeated characters. That's quite an interesting thing. I mean, there's a very, very interesting comparison between some of the No plays and the ghost in Hamlet.
Oh, Hamlet, yeah.
Very interesting parallel. I don't know whether Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was well known to steal left, right, and centre and then make it better.
So most of the No play is about the spirits.
Yes.
Living or dead, evil or good.
Yes.
It's about a soul or spirits. Again, this is difficult to interpret in different language. The soul, spirit, and that's you cannot directly perceive, but you have to create your own in your own brain from the total integration of atmosphere.
We have spoken in a very selfish way about ourselves and the audience's perception of No. It would be extremely interesting to know what the No performers and players experience in these things. I mean, do they, after the 100th performance, still experience the ambiguity of it? Do you know?
No.
Shall we? We will engage them tomorrow. I think
Yes,
our time is up now.
Don't ask me too much difficult questions. I'm not sure on
I'm asking you the simplest question.
But the simplest question is most difficult for the brain science. We don't know anything about it yet.
Well, I think from my point of view, if I may just summarize what I think is extremely interesting, No theatre is obviously a treasure house of interesting things, but the representation of faces and bodies, the interaction between face and body areas in the brain, the question of the binding of the melody and the movement and the facial expressions, and above all the Jugend, that's the experience of beauty, but experience of beauty which is only partly perceived but fully experienced. These are extremely interesting topics for me, and I shall develop some of these tomorrow and give you a surprise in terms of...
A surprise?
Yes.
Well, I have a surprise too.
Good.
So, No was most evolved, taken care of by most evolved part of the brain. And that's how the biological interpretation behind it. So we are primates. We are kind of monkeys. And our brain function, including performance, very much constrained by primate brain principle. We cannot escape from it. And most of the time, we behave like monkeys.
Because we are.
Because we are, I'm not sure about you, but myself, I regard myself as a part of kind of a monkey. But the important thing, the hot topics in neuroscience now is this symbolism and also the consciousness, how you are conscious about yourself. You know, non-human animals might be conscious to some extent, but it's not fully conscious in our thought. And this self-consciousness comes from some kind of reflexive or recursive circuits in the brain to look yourself. And actually, I came from the consciousness conference in Krakow, in Poland, this week. And there's a World Consciousness Conference. Now this is becoming hot.
Yes.
Very hot topic.
On the question of consciousness, let me say that I think monkeys and dogs and cats and other animals and even flies are conscious, but only we are conscious of being conscious.
The recursion
yes.
of yourself.
May I end on a note of discord, because I think we have to have some disagreement. Not agreeing on everything, it's not good. That I think that I go along with what Stuart Sutherland, who was the late professor of psychology at Sussex University, said, and he said it 20 years ago, it's still true today, that not a single sentence written about consciousness is worth reading.
Until now.
Until the meeting. Very good.
But you have a theory of the micro-consciousness, didn't you?
But my theory of micro-consciousness is a theory of micro-consciousness, not theory of consciousness. I think these people have got these grand theories of consciousness, and I think a lot of damage has been done to brain sciences by emphasizing that we can study consciousness when in fact we are not able to, we are not even able to define what consciousness is yet. Anyway.
So that is the point. So we are constrained in a primate brain, and we are most of the time behaving like monkeys. But sometime we can become beyond the monkey by our own intention. And that makes a difference. Probably 99% of the time we are unconscious and behaving like monkeys, but at 1%, whatever you like, you become conscious yourself. And that's why it's very difficult to study in the neuroscience so far. But we are now approaching the time, the technology and the interpretation and theory, that are about to approach it. And the Noh, they have provided us with this platform to study this higher thing 600 years ago. And now it's a time to unify Noh and the Noh, which is brain in Japanese. And it's about a time to unify it.
Yes, I agree, and I agree that there is a degree of spirituality and spiritualism in Eastern cultures that we make a mistake in ignoring. I think they do have fantastic insights. I just don't think that consciousness will be resolved anyway in my lifetime, or in the lifetime of my children or grandchildren. And that's long enough for me.
Well, that's long enough for me too. But we have descendants. Yes, we can count on them.
I think our time is up.
Yeah, and probably we better introduce what we are going to do tomorrow. You already did a little bit.
Yes, I'm going to talk really about ambiguity and things like that, and I want to talk about the objectivity of subjective experiences, which are the only experiences you are able to have. People lie to you, they say, but this is an illusion. There is no illusion, because the only experience you can have is the one that the brain allows you, and I'm going to demonstrate it for you tomorrow, and I hope it will be a very, very convincing way.
Are you conscious about it?
You are absolutely conscious, yes. So whatever that means.
So I'm going to talk about this self-objectification that Zeyami said, Riken no Ken. And by the way, my institute is called Riken, but it's nothing to do with Zeyami's Riken. This is kind of another ambiguity that Japanese language has. Mm-hmm. So same sounds, but different Chinese characters and completely different meanings. And the neural mechanism it's about being neuroscientists, including myself. It's about to solve that problem, I believe.
Yes.
And then that part of the brain is taking care that part of the brain is taking care of this higher cognitive function, which is a result of the primate evolution, which has some biological interpretation that is not evolved by brain itself, but the interaction with environment. So there are positive feedback between it. That's a unification of the whole world, regarding ourselves as a part of the world, and regarding ourselves as a part of the whole audience This is common with the Noh principle.
Right.
So
So
that's
that's
why I'm
going
going
to
to
be
talk tomorrow.
extremely interesting. I look forward very much to that tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, and we'll probably invite and introduce the next speaker, who is a prominent Noh scholar from the Hosei University, Professor Reiko Yamanaga. And thank you very much.